My support ints my lane all the time. My jungler invades when I don't have priority. My top laner never teleports to the objective fight. My team sucks. These are the complaints we hear time after time from lower ELO players who are struggling to climb in ranked. The usual retort to complaints like that is simply to tell the player that they belong in the ELO that they're playing in. If you can't carry when everyone else is bad, then surely you're just as bad as they are, right? Well, we're here to tell you that may not always be true. Sometimes you can actually be a significantly better player for the ELO that you're in and still be unable to climb, and it's usually for a very silly reason. A big problem we often see holding good players back is that they often don't realize that low and high ELO can honestly be classified as completely different games. In lower brackets, you're playing with bad players against other bad players, and in high ELO, you have good teammates while you're versus other good players. Although the games can look similar, the decisions required to win in low and high ELO are vastly different and often require completely different skill sets. Let's put it this way. It's like learning the King's Indian attack in chess and trying to apply it, but then you realize you were just playing Hungry Hungry Hippos the whole time. You see, it just isn't relevant to learn such a complex strategy for a game you could never use it in. That is what this guide will cover. We'll be taking a look at critical moments where a good player made a good decision, and yet they get punished simply because playing correctly in low ELO can often backfire. And although we will be covering the perspective of mainly ADCs in this guide, the things we'll cover will apply to any role. And just to add a bit more to that previous point, this is what we constantly teach and cover on our vast set of courses over at SkillCapped. The game needs to be played completely differently in your ELO compared to what you see in pro play and high ELO streams. We teach you the right way to climb from the low ELO perspective. If you want to climb quickly and learn how to deal with bad teammates, then check us out after this. In fact, we're so confident in our teaching methods that we have a money-back guarantee on our service, which no other coaching platform would dare to provide. Anyway, with that in mind, let's begin with today's guide. We'll be covering some catastrophic decisions made by good players who threw their games simply because they try to play in a way that's suitable for high ELO rather than the bracket they're actually playing in. By the way, every replay we'll cover here will be from Platinum ELO and above. This is to show you that a very simple mindset shift might be all that's stopping you from reaching your ELO goals, even if it's all the way up to Diamond. The first example we'll cover is from a Jinx who is obscenely fed. It's fair to say that with a lead this massive, that you could put a challenger player in this Jinx's shoes and they'd win this game 99% of the time. However, that will not be the case here, simply because this low ELO Jinx is going to fall for one of the deadliest low ELO traps that you need to watch out for. As we approach Jinx's demise, let's break down the state of the map. She just pushed this wave and is starting to make her way into the river. This is clearly because her teammates are setting up a collapse on the enemy Akali, and she wants to join up with them. Shortly after, we even see the enemy Rengar in the jungle, who might be a threat to her Nami and Bel'Veth. These are the signs that led this Jinx to make the decision to collapse here. Now, if you watch our guides regularly, then you could easily guess what Jinx's mistake here is, and what she should have done. We've covered similar situations to this one countless times. There's an incoming enemy wave in mid, therefore Jinx should just stay and keep pushing to keep mid priority and pressure the mid tower while her teammates try to go for the pick. However, if you ask a high ELO player about this situation, it's very likely they'll tell you that what Jinx is doing isn't bad. Take a look at the game score and dragon count. Her team is decisively ahead and is one dragon away from Infernal Soul. This game is a wrap if nothing goes wrong. A simple concept that applies to almost any competitive game is that your adversity to risk should be higher the bigger your lead is. If you're behind or even with your opponents, then riskier options have more merit since you need to make something happen to win the game. However, when you're ahead, taking big risks isn't required. You just need to maintain your lead and make sure you never throw to win the game. In this specific case, Jinx is conceding a single wave and a bit of mid pressure to the enemy team, but this makes sure that her own team's collapse works and that nothing goes wrong in the play that's going on. If you ask any high ELO player what they think about Jinx's play here, some may tell you it's not the best play possible, but they'd all agree that it's the safe and reliable option. It's not a bad decision by any means. But we're in Platinum, aka low ELO. Let's watch what happens. Take a look at how Bel'Veth and Nami both got so distracted by Rengar that they forgot what they were doing in the first place. It's only Jinx who notices that Uxin is 1v1ing the enemy Akali, so she tries to help with her ult. Unfortunately, Uxin was expecting more help from his team and ends up dying all on his own. Somehow the Rengar got to this fight first. Now take a look at how these three players will position relative to each other. Nami is going the wrong way to who knows where on her own. Likewise, Bel'Veth is so tunnel vision on finding the low health Akali that she's leaving her teammates behind. Their horrible team-based positioning allows their opponents to slowly pincer them and get a great engage off to start the fight. Jinx, despite her best efforts, is eventually caught out and hands over a massive 1000 gold shutdown to the enemy ADC. And of course, this ends up being the catalyst to the multiple throws that Jinx and her team kept making, which eventually resulted in a lost game from the great position that they were in earlier. Looking back, it's easy to see why this play would have probably gone well in a higher ELO game. Ukshin would not have just been left to die on his own. A good Bel'Veth and Nami wouldn't have been nearly as lost as these two were. Likewise, when Jinx was in this area, Bel'Veth and Nami would know that they need to work together to push their way out of this pincer play by the enemy team. Instead, they're again both completely lost. This should be your big takeaway from this example. In low elo, you never want to commit to plays that rely on any competence from your teammates for you to come out ahead. You want to go for options that are much more versatile and give you room to maneuver in case things go wrong. The reason pushing mid here is so good is because even in the worst case of situations, Jinx would have options to come out ahead or just slightly behind. She can potentially push the wave and then collapse to help her teammates afterwards, even if she's a little late. Also, it forces the enemy Samira to remain in mid the whole time. Or maybe if she can't collapse, at the very least she can zone Samira and maybe Rel from approaching the fight on her own with her W and E. Even in a horrible scenario where Samira and Rel were already there and her team's play fails, at the very least she has the ability to trade the tower in mid. There's a bunch of variations on what could have happened here, but the point remains the same. The reason that collapsing here is bad is because it puts her at the mercy of how her teammates play the situation and gives her no other alternatives. Playing in low elo is about giving yourself multiple good choices so that it doesn't matter how your teammates play. There always needs to be an option that lets you come out on top. This is by far one of the most consistent problems we notice analyzing low elo. Players tunnel vision way too much on following up on team plays. But you need to account for the fact that things can and very likely will go wrong. Making choices that don't leave you so exposed in case of your teammates' screw-ups is one of the most important concepts when it comes to climbing consistently, but it's something we rarely see from low elo players. Alright, let's move on to another huge mistake we see all the time. But first, let's get some context for how this game is going for Twitch. His team already has the Hextech Soul, as you can see, and they end up using that advantage to win a fight for the Elder Dragon. After claiming that objective, Twitch even manages to claim the Baron on top of that for his comrades. Now, most of his team has the 3 strongest buffs in the game, all at the same time, which brings us to this following moment. As Twitch runs to regroup with his team, we spot Teemo down in bot lane. Once again, in high elo, it is acceptable to ignore Teemo and go down mid as 5 to end the game. Teemo has to go through 4 full health towers all on his own, while his own team defends versus a super buffed team. It's all but guaranteed that Twitch and his team win the game if Teemo stays bottom, in high elo. But as we keep repeating again and again, in lower brackets, this is the worst call you can possibly make. Let's watch what happens. As Twitch arrives at the scene, his teammates gave the enemy team a chance for an engage that both killed some of them, but more importantly completely killed off the wave. In spite of that, due to their buff advantage, Twitch's team does have 3 surviving members to 0 here. The game is surely won. However, only Akali chooses to base from this spot. Volibear believes it best that he stays here instead of preventing Teemo from ending the game. Sadly for Twitch, Akali wasn't enough to take down Teemo and the match is lost. The main takeaway here is that Twitch could have just stayed bottom, killed Teemo from a million yards away with his ult, and made sure this possibility couldn't ever happen. Yes, maybe you don't end the game immediately that way, but it's better than risking everything in low elo. We're aware that this is a situation that you're unlikely to ever be in, but we wanted to choose an extreme example to highlight this simple concept. Stop ever following low elo calls from your team. That has to either work or you completely lose the game from it. You almost never have to take such drastic actions to win games in anything below Masters. Hopefully that's a simple concept to understand. Now let's show you the more common throw that happens in low elo based on that. Baron forces. The best example is when there's someone side laning, either the enemy team or your own. In this Ashe's game, it's her Nasus that's in bot, and he gets collapsed on by both Ornn and LeBlanc. As a result, Ashe and friends are going to force Baron. Like before, this is actually a good call in high elo, but you should all know that this is a recipe for disaster with bad teammates. Just because your teammate died on the other side of the map does not mean that you need to force a do or die play. Look how awkward this is beginning to look. Not only that, but in low elo, people don't even track teleport's cooldown, which means that Ornn was able to come here whenever he wanted to anyway. The end result is just another massive throw for no reason. You can't control your side laner throwing their life away for no reason as they split push. It's going to happen, but that doesn't mean you need to make a crazy cross-map play. Your side laner may get mad despite it being their fault, but it's not like you'll lose the game if you don't get Baron. You can do simpler cross-map plays instead. Rather than forcing Baron, communicate with your team that they should not commit and to just turn when the enemy comes, or invade the jungle and take Raptors and Krugs if they're up. If nothing else, just get vision control with your numbers advantage. Your teammate dying one time in a side lane is not the end of the world, so don't feel this intense pressure to force a play that is hard to execute, especially with less than competent teammates. That's obviously a recipe for disaster. And finally, let's move on to the third big error low elo players make, which is having any faith that your teammates know how to cover you when you pressure. Let's show you what we mean with this example from a Caitlyn player. She and her teammate happen to score a pick on the enemy Quinn. This opens them up to pushing the tier 1 mid tower down and even looking to pressure the tier 2 tower as well. For a final time, let's break down why pushing here is the technically correct play. The enemy team is down a play for a bit, Wukong is top being held down by Volibear, and there's 2 enemy members in bottom. This means that the only defender here is going to be Ezreal for a little bit. As long as Volibear keeps pressuring top and Kindred shadows around here, this will be a successful push. Let's watch what happens. Volibear immediately recalls, and Kindred paths towards the enemy Krugs, leaving Caitlyn and Lux behind on their own. As a result, the enemy Quinn, which should have been easily zoned by a Kindred here, is instead allowed to respawn and re-engage onto Caitlyn. Not only that, but Wukong isn't tied up in top lane anymore and was able to set up a flank of his own. We cannot emphasize this enough. Caitlyn played this game really well and was making good choices for a high elo player. She very easily could have taken this mid lane tier 2 tower and opened up the map to make the game so much easier. And it's fine to know what the correct play technically is if your teammates are good, but your teammates will never be good, so stop leaning and tunneling on plays that require competency. You'll never get that in low elo. Caitlyn should expect that her teammates are blind, and the second that she saw Volibear and Kindred leave, she should have backed off too. But instead, she tunnel visions and throws just like every other ADC we've seen here today. If you really want to climb, then you absolutely need to view low elo and high elo as completely different games. Some of you may not want to stop at Diamond or even Masters. Maybe you have crazy aspirations to go for the super high ranks of solo queue. However, you will not get there playing the way high elo players do. Learn how to win in low elo first, and then once you actually climb, you can start learning how to play the real League of Legends. For now, you're sadly stuck playing Zookeeper, and you just need to accept that. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about skill caps. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. Anyway, that's a wrap on this one, guys. Thanks for watching as always, and catch you next time. See ya!